Five, six, seven, eight. Welcome, everybody. It is the Smart in Public podcast. It's a podcast that discusses business and careers and life through the eyes of comms professionals and a bunch of other people, really. We have another guest here today that we're so excited about. You might already have known. I think we talked about it last week on the pod, how excited we are to have Ashley Mayer here with us.
Oh,
Yeah.
hey guys.
Also, huge fan of Great Chat. We'll talk about that a little bit more too. But
Thank
just
you.
from podcaster to podcaster, we know the love that it goes into building those, especially with how many guests do you guys have on, or how many hosts do you have?
So we have 5 hosts, but I have to say it's an amazing hack because we sort of try to have at least 3 people on any given week. So it gives us a little bit of flexibility, whereas I imagine you guys probably don't do the podcast unless there are 2 of you, and so there's a little more flexibility for people's insane travel schedules or work blowing up or anything like that.
That's really smart. Could you imagine if it was just like me one day? I'll just
monologuing.
Voice has saved the day many a day when I've just had a kid emergency or whatever. There has been a few solo outings for Boysen on the podcast.
It's always with guests, but it's like
True.
If I were to just record by myself, Duffy is the person that reins me back in. She's like, you're out there. Bring it home, girl.
You could have a special name for those podcasts, like the unhinged version or whatever.
Boysen goes off the reservation.
Off the rails.
Yeah. Love it.
Let's get down to I want to introduce you properly. So for anybody that doesn't know Ashley, she's the co-founder and GP of Coalition, which is an early stage VC firm powered by active operators. And I want to get into what that means to you a little bit later. Ashley's first startup job was at enterprise software company Box. And I think a lot of people would know Ashley from Twitter and the work she was doing there, building up her own profile and building up Box as a company. But essentially she led comms there for 6 years from a 50-person team through to IPO, which is crazy. And then she went to lead marketing at VC firm called Social Capital. And before starting Coalition with her 3 co-founders, she was the VP of comms at Glossier, which is an NY-based beauty startup that I'm sure many of us know and love.
And where?
And where. That's right. So let's dive in from your background. So you've made this super unique transition from comms to being co-founder and GP at Coalition. So can you tell us a little bit, how did you get to where you are? What took you down that path?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was not intentional. If you had asked me while I was at Box what I might be doing, 10 years from then, I would not have said I would work at, let alone run a venture firm. So this was very much sort of an accidental path into venture. And it's funny, I remember when I was at Social Capital, running marketing. So that meant working across our portfolio, but also the firm's brand. And we were doing a lot of crazy and innovative stuff, launching new capital products, taking the SPAC that set off the SPAC craze public. My apologies. I looked over at the investing team and I was like, I don't think I'd want that job. They just take tons of meetings. They say yes a few times a year, and then they have to wait 10 years to find out if it was a good decision. And I was like, I love my feedback loops. And, with comms, you have really immediate, tight, rich feedback loops. So by no means did I have a personal goal of starting a venture firm. What happened was after I left Social Capital and joined Glossier, kind of this amazing hyper growth period.
Yeah.
The year I joined, they did $100 million in sales, raised their first unicorn round, not long after that. So growth stage company, really fun story, super culturally relevant. All of those were really fun things to play with from a comms standpoint, especially while doing consumer comms for the very first time. But I really missed working with early stage founders. And I had gotten used to doing that at Social Capital. So working with founders, especially on how to tell your story, when the company is mostly just a story about the future. There's very little product, there's very little team, there's oftentimes no traction. It's really just an idea about what could be possible. And I found that work so exciting, because, your ability to tell a story that gets your first employees to join, your first investors to invest, your first customers to sign up, it's so existential. And so it's very different than sort of the growth stage reputation management and, the sort of more nuanced and complex parts of communications. And so while I was at Glossier, I started angel investing and loved that. It was so fun to have skin in the game and to be able to help these founders in really tangible ways. Also with something that is like deeply personal and kind of scary when you're like launching your company for the first time. And just like fell in love with doing that and started investing alongside my 3 now partners at Coalition. Thrive wanted to start a scout program, and we pooled capital and invested together and started building out this whole operator ecosystem to bring more operators onto cap tables. And so it kind of just became this nights and weekends obsession.
Yeah.
And then when I left Glossier in the summer of 2021, after about 3 years, started spending more time on Coalition, and I was like, oh, I think there's a venture product here. Like, I think people might want this, and maybe we're good at it. We'll see. Again, long feedback loop, so stay tuned. But yeah, that sort of idea of like operating expertise on cap tables, so not just capital, but really tangible support from people who are still in the trenches. That's always been really resonant with founders, and I think we approach the practice of investing differently because we have our operator backgrounds.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, what does that active operator look like to you in definition?
Yeah, well, it's easier when talking about my 3 partners. So we have a really unique team structure where I am the only full-time GP at Coalition, and my 3 partners are full-time founders and company builders. So one is building in healthcare. She's the CEO of City Block Health, which is this massive value-based care startup. One is building in enterprise AI, a company called Tribe AI, which is an AI-native services company. They partner, great, with OpenAI and Anthropic, and like help enterprises actually build AI products successfully. And the other, her startup got acquired by IAC, and so she's now VP of Services at Angie, their largest holding. And so we joke that she's like our home services thought leader, but all things like SMB, home services, marketplaces. And so for them, they are full-time operators, part-time investors. And we actually think that's such an edge when it comes to like sourcing great founder talent, picking the right companies and problems to solve, supporting those companies. And then I get to kind of have my cake and eat it too, because a huge part of building a venture firm from the ground up is storytelling, is brand building.
Yeah.
And then, my value to the founders we back is I get my hands dirty and help them launch their companies, tell their stories, jump in a crisis. And so I think comms is actually one of the very few careers where you can be a full-time investor and also still like a full-time practitioner of that skill, because like everything is narrative and brand and story. And so I feel, if instead of feeling like I switched careers, I feel like I just added one.
Yeah.
Give yourself more work.
Yeah, exactly. Seems to be a pattern.
Comms people have such an interesting view of a business as well. So I think that really plays to kind of like that storytelling and how you're able to help founders in that way as well. It's quite unique.
Yeah, and I think being a founder is very lonely, and I think you learn that when you are, I've always worked very closely with the founders I've backed, and a lot of things that are discussed under the guise of comms, really about like leadership and business strategy and confidence and things like that. And so I've always loved being that sort of like supportive partner to a founder, and someone who will like sit in that uncertainty with them, someone who will push back or, be a brainstorm partner when they need one. And so that feels very natural to then like translate that to an investor-founder relationship. I'm not telling anyone what to do or how they should build their company, but I'm there when they need someone to like bounce ideas off of, or deal with like a crisis or something really challenging. And so I think that lens is really helpful. And then, yeah, like obviously, as I said, like early stage startups are mostly just stories with like very few proof points. And so also coming and investing through that lens of like, how big is this story? Does it make sense? Is it going to resonate with people? Are they going to be able to raise more capital, hire more people, outpace these competitors? I think it's a fun way to look at it, and maybe a little bit similar to some of the folks who've made the transition from journalism to investing, which is more common than comms to investing for sure.
I didn't know about that. It's more common to see the journalist side coming across to investing as well.
Yeah, there are very few people that I know who've done the comms to investing pipeline, and I think there are all sorts of reasons for that. Maybe it'll become more common now because like awareness and distribution is everything, especially as AI has commoditized a lot of other parts of company building and technology building. So maybe we'll see more people with marketing or comms backgrounds going into investing. In journalism, there are some like tried and true examples. Michael Moritz was a journalist. MG Siegler was a journalist. Michael Arrington launched Crunch Fund, and now he has some crypto fund. Alexia Benatzos, who was co-editor of TechCrunch, launched a fund. So by no means is it a huge group, but there are some like notable figures, and I think
interesting.
Yeah.
For those that maybe don't know much about the investing world, can you just tell us a little bit, Ashley, about like what your day-to-day looks like, if that's even possible? I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I guess maybe the thing that is very different from operating, and when I say operating, I really just mean working at a tech company, a tech startup. So I feel like that word does get thrown around a lot. When I was in my, like, I led comms at 2 startups and led marketing at a VC firm. And like, I felt like every day I knew how I needed to spend my time. Like there was sort of like clear, because you're part of the structure, right? You're part of this bigger organizational structure. It has priorities. You're sort of mapping your priorities to what the business needs. And then of course, comms lives on the, if a company's a bubble, you have to live on the edge because you also have to think about all the externalities. But I think on any given day or week, it was like, oh, these are the most important things to work on. And the fascinating thing about venture is you kind of have to like blow up the idea of having the comfort of a structure like that. Like I could take 10 founder pitch calls today, or I could read and think and try to build a thesis or, go down some idea rabbit hole. Or I could try to write something that's going to go viral and make people want me on their cap table. I mean, there are a million ways to spend your time. Of course, when you're not just investing, but you're running a fund, there's also a lot of really unsexy parts, right? So I'm in auditing season. There's a lot of admin. So, every day really does look different. And I think the fact that there really is no set way to do venture, I think there are much more sort of accessible or reliable playbooks for company building, and venture is this like very weird craft where you can be mediocre or amazing an infinite number of ways. And you can, have a fund where you do 10 deals and you're super concentrated, or have a fund where you do 100 deals and you're super diversified, and there's no one can hand you like, hey, if you do these things, you're going to be successful. Again, because the feedback loops are so long and there's so much uncertainty. I mean, it's probably a little different at the growth stage, but early stage. And so, so my days really do look different. And I try to just actually structure, like I try to not take a bunch of meetings in the morning, leave that more for deeper work, like maybe doing some diligence calls or going down some rabbit holes on companies that I'm looking at or writing, reading. And then my afternoons tend to be pretty stacked with meetings, either with like new founders or founders in our portfolio where, I'm jumping in to support them, or chatting with our LPs, or catching up with other investors. And so, you have to really be thoughtful about your calendar because it can go in any direction.
Which sounds
I mean, but you guys also know, like, when you're at a company, you have crazy calendars too. It's just a different kind of crazy.
It's just different.
Because you have so much autonomy.
Yeah.
And you could listen to like 30 startup pitches a week and think you're crushing it.
Yeah.
And actually,
that's true. Yeah. Is it hurting or helping is the theme.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to like constantly check in with yourself and be like, is this actually how I should be spending my time? Is this making me better as an investor, as a member of cap table, as a fund manager? And so I think that piece, I never had to do that when I was in my comms roles. It always felt very obvious to me. Are we on track? Like, did that launch go well? Or is our messaging landing? Like, what's the sentiment inside the company? How's my relationship with the CEO? Like, those things were always apparent to me. And I think there's just a little bit less of that when you're building a firm.
Yeah, you get into a little bit of a different rhythm. Yeah. When you're working with founders, like given the viewpoint that you have now, and I know that you were just at TechCrunch. I think you did a podcast with
we called it a Great Chat Mini. So Helen Min and I did a little, was on breaking through the noise. So how to tell your startup story in a way that resonates in this, like, what is a very noisy time.
I feel like that's also like a very noisy topic right now. Everybody kind of wants to understand, like, what is a chief storyteller? And
oh my gosh, people went to town on that Wall Street Journal article before the holidays.
They're still writing about it. Like, I see it everywhere still. What do you think the chief storyteller actually means? Because I think I told Duvasy last week that I thought you had the winning tweet of like who's going to tell him. And so but talk a little bit about what chief storyteller, or like why you think that conversation is coming out now.
Well, I'll recap what I said, which is that, newsflash, like your company already has a chief storyteller, and it's your founder CEO, because that is their job. And I think the best comms relationships have always been with a founder who like understands that and looks at that as a partnership versus I'm outsourcing this part of company building to this person or team. But why that story got so much attention, I think it's two things. One is just that it is very noisy right now, and it's very hard to break through the noise. Everyone feels that. And also it feels kind of existential. Like, I think the more traditional moats in startups and tech are kind of disappearing. Like, AI is changing the game so quickly. So many startups are wrappers on the same LLMs. Like, it's very hard to differentiate. There's an explosion of innovation happening. It's amazing, but it also means you might have like 20 competitors, whereas maybe 10 years ago you would have had 2 in your category. And so I think one of the few places you can really differentiate is on story. And story as it also translates to awareness and distribution and brand and all of that. And so I think the only way to differentiate on story is to actually become synonymous with some idea about the future or the way the world is changing. I actually think we're doing it wrong, because most stories right now are about like ARR and growth and valuations and 996. And so I have like lots of thoughts on why we're in like a very sloppy era of startup storytelling, understandably, but like I think there's a lot of room for improvement, which is actually great news for startups who want to differentiate in this way. And then I think the other thing that I saw, and I say this with like a lot of empathy and understanding, is a lot of comms people loved that, right? Because it's like, oh, this elevates us to like this very strategic function. And I think a PR comms is like going through this really interesting transition, because when I think back to my career at Box, it's not that we outsourced our story to the media, but the media were the main channel we used to build awareness. And so I mean, it was crazy. Like, Box was an enterprise software company. We'd have like a new feature or product launch, and we'd pre-brief 20 or 25 reporters, like under embargo. You cannot run that playbook today, right? Like, it's really only the hyperscalers that get reliable news coverage, and they're getting it either because like they have some new run rate or new valuation, or it's thinking machines and the founding team is blowing up. Like, and that just sucks up a lot of oxygen, and it means that media still an important channel, but it can't be the channel you put like all your eggs in that basket. And so I think there's sort of this kind of existential moment for the comms profession with the go direct mandate and sort of like the ground shifting in real time. And I see a lot of people adjusting to that very well, but it almost felt like story was a rebrand of comms and the way growth was a rebrand of marketing like 10 years ago and made it sexier. And so I think I could understand why people were like, let's claim this. Like this is the most important thing and we do it. And so I think it was both those things. I think it's both like story is incredibly important right now, and also that the comms profession is kind of in this like reset mode. And so it felt galvanizing to have a way to talk about the importance of that work.
I also thought it was really interesting because I actually saw sort of 3 different categories of professionals sort of almost claiming that was sort of them, right? Like it was like the comms, comms people saying like, yes, we're back at this like strategic level. That's us, that's our role. But I also saw like content people who saw themselves as very much like content, thinking that was, and then there's kind of this third category of like the journalists coming across to this world and sort of taking on these editorial storyteller roles within companies. And so I think what's interesting about it is like, because it is a bit nebulous, like chief storyteller, there's actually the feeders into that are quite interesting versus like, I wish comms, like I kind of feel like we don't need a new title. Like it's okay. We can be that role without being the chief storyteller. I don't know. I thought it was interesting seeing the different groups kind of thinking through who that role is for.
What you described, I would put under the comms bucket already, right?
Yeah.
And every company, like the way you structure your teams is different. And so sometimes content is under comms, sometimes it's under marketing or whatever. But like comms to me at the highest level, like includes all of that.
Yeah.
And I think that for people who lead comms teams, they do need to have like a more expansive skill set than maybe they did 10 years ago. But it was really interesting to see different people claim that. And also, I should say, like it's a terrible job market, right? People are feeling stressed about their relevance. And I mean, it's not just in this profession. It's literally, I mean, if you're a software engineer, you're wondering if you're going to have a job in a year. And so I also think like, everyone's like
100%. It's that, it's a little bit of an interesting time, I think, for people getting a little bit, sensitive about where they fit and what that looks like going forward.
Yeah. I think we're all sort of reimagining what career paths look like right now.
Yeah.
100%. Reimagining is a good word for that.
Yeah.
I like that. I think we're all saying that everyone needs a storyteller, but what do you actually, from your perspective, think founders are actually looking for? Like, what do founders actually need in that stage?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, because I spend my time at early stages.
Right.
And so, these founders are not going to have a comms person or a content person on their team. And so what they need is someone to like think about, like review and think and brainstorm with them. And because like stories don't get to live in a vacuum, right? They're only good. You can go into a dark room and like, write your manifesto and then like show it to and people don't like it. It doesn't mean anything. And so I think stories are like these living things that they need feedback. And so I think at the earliest stages, that's what founders need. Founders need like psychological safety and a place where they can sort of explore what's the biggest possible version of our story that people will believe. And honestly, that's kind of the same thing they probably need later on. It's just that there's all this structure around it, right? Yeah. And so, I think I was so lucky to start my comms career at Box because Aaron was such a big thinker. We actually had a meeting every Friday at 5 p.m., which sounds cruel, especially when you commute. But it was my favorite meeting of the week, and we just called it Big Ideas Sync. And it was this like cross section of people from like different teams, but a lot of the comms team there. And we would just think up like, what are the like biggest, craziest things we could do?
Cool.
And then a lot of times we'd go and do them. And so I really do think, or the biggest stories we can tell, or like, what's the message we can own? Or if we were to do a business school course, what would it be about? What would it be called? And then we like went and did that. And so I think founders like live and breathe their company, every waking moment of every day, and probably in their dreams. And they just need people where they can like tease things out with. And so, and that just looks different at different stages.
I think a good comms person also over time develops this level of like judgment that a founder finds really valuable. So like you said, like they're sleeping it, same thing. They're dreaming it and they're thinking about it all the time. They can do anything they want, but it's on us to be like, let's save that. Let's act on that. Now's a good time. Like, we're
a filter for helping them figure out like what, totally. And that's why the trust piece is so important. And like the ability to debate. And, it was really interesting going from working in Silicon Valley in tech to working at Glossier, because every founder, CEO I've worked with has been like a phenomenal storyteller. That was my sort of career cheat code when I was in comms, right? Like Erin was so funny and so smart and so good, and like stayed at the 30,000 foot view, never tried to talk about like sharing files, which most people don't want to hear about, frankly. And then Chamath is a different beast today, but like very charismatic, like very good at saying like big, spicy, attention-grabbing things. And then Emily, Emily's brand preceded Glossier, and she was known for her taste and her storytelling, which was not just verbal, but also visual and aesthetic. And it was so interesting for me going to Glossier, because I was raised in like software cultures and met with male founders, and ways of, the way you talk about technology is very different than the way you talk about like beauty, and the way you talk to IT buyers is very different than the way you talk to like individual consumers. And so, I think that, but I think that's the beauty of this role, is you don't have to be the expert. You're sort of the filter. You're like the person helping to tease out like and refine the best ideas from the founder. And I think that means, you can take this job into any industry if you learn how to do that for someone who is, who understands that that's a big part of their job. It's why you can go from Salesforce to Anduril, right? Very different companies. But those skills remain the same.
Yeah, I do think it's a good lesson for, some of our listeners are sort of early or mid-stage, and I think there is this fear that you get stuck in one spot, because you've been in tech for forever, and I think you're right, like thinking about our skill set as a skill set, not industry based, and obviously it helps that you kind of know an industry, but I do think it's very transferable if you think of the skills as that, versus like my skill is understanding the software. It's like, that's not my strength, it's being that filter. It's also, you talked about the externalities. I think it's living in that edge, right? Of like really understanding what's happening in the outside world. And I would imagine, I haven't worked with that many founders, but I would imagine because they live and breathe their business, sometimes the externality is not necessarily front of mind. And so that's a skill set you need to bring.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think this is why I'm gonna pivot us a bit, but why I find a lot of the go direct era of storytelling so two-dimensional, because it's just very promotional, and I think it's a good reminder that a big part of what journalists do and did when they were the main channel was like help explain like, so what? Why should you, reader, care about this company in a category of software or hardware or whatever that you're never going to use? And I think because founders are living and breathing their company every day, it's like so real to them and so alive. And it's so hard for them to like, I mean, some people do this naturally, but a lot of them have a really hard time figuring out, how do I put this in context for people in a way that like helps them care, even if they're not going to, if they're not buying weaponry for like they're not buying defense tech, or they're not buying, a SaaS tool. What is it about this founder, this startup, this journey? Like, what are they a microcosm of that I do care about? And so, this is where I think there's a lot of opportunity to differentiate for startups that are willing to do the work. But I scroll through Twitter or even LinkedIn, and like all the startup announcements are like, we've raised more money, our valuation is now X, and I have to like scroll or click like a couple times before I even figure out what the company does.
Yeah.
And I just think there's the like, so what question. Like, and I think we're all a little bit drunk on like, oh wow, companies are growing faster than ever before. The AI platform shift is like so amazing. Like robotics is like, maybe its time is now. There's some like macro things that are happening that kind of have allowed us to be very lazy in terms of talking about like these companies and their products and their businesses and like why anyone should care. And I also think like the founder profiles are a little bit two-dimensional as well. And my hunch is that's actually one of the reasons why podcasts have taken off, because this format doesn't allow for being like super scripted. Like if especially if it's like a Joe Rogan style 3-hour thing, like eventually you're going to say something interesting whether you mean to or not. And so it feels more authentic than I think what people are getting right now, which are these very, like people are bad at talking about themselves in an interesting way. We kind of all are.
It's hilarious how that happens. Like, especially with comms people, where we are always promoting other people and finding that like hook. Yeah. And it's really hard when you're doing it for yourself. So I have a lot of empathy for founders when they have to finally like get out there and talk about themselves.
It's very hard to see yourself as a character. I almost said caricature, and that works too. Like I remember a lot of the like early coverage of Aaron, and maybe it's still like was about like he wore these sneakers and he had his like curly hair and he like moved really fast and he'd run and he'd only eat pizza and like things that he would never like present about himself, but like which all added to this picture of like, even if you didn't work with him every day and you didn't know him, you felt like you had a sense of like this guy's energy and like how he showed up. And so we can't do that for ourselves. It's too weird. And so instead we just have like a lot of people talking their book, and it's just like not that interesting. It's kind of boring.
Do you think with like the go direct strategy that there's a loss of remembering like who your audience is? It's almost like forcing. What am I trying to say? Like forcing a fit?
I think it's a danger. I think that that's a real danger, because a lot of times where you might have like the easiest time getting engagement is not necessarily where your audience is. So I think there are plenty of startups who sell to other startups. And so, going viral on X in that case actually can work pretty well, right? Like, because there are a lot of other startup founders on there. But if you sell into healthcare systems or you sell into the government, and you're just spending all your time getting engagement on, I hate calling it X, I'm going to call it Twitter. Twitter, X is just a terrible name. And you're probably, it can feel like you're making progress, 'cause like, and especially if you're getting that attention. Oh, I get more attention if I shitpost or I'm trolling or I'm, and it actually can be like antithetical to what the business needs. And so I do think that's like a really important thing to keep in mind, is that you always have to start with your audience. Like, who are they? Where are they? What do they care about? And not get caught up in status games. And it's okay to do both, but don't fool yourself thinking that, your Twitter posts are, necessarily reaching the target customer if that target customer is like not on the platform.
Reassurance is not progress necessarily.
Also, like, I can't trust feedback loops on like Twitter or LinkedIn, like from different reasons.
We have very different like follower counts, but like I was gonna say, if you can even get feedback, like I feel like the algorithm right now is so bad. Like,
no, it's very much changed. I mean, I'm less like on Twitter than I was in prior eras. But like the things that get a lot of attention on Twitter are extremes, right? Like, being super political. Like, I won't name names, but there are investors who are like weighing in on Greenland. And I'm like,
Yeah.
does anyone want this? Like, I know you're getting a lot of engagement, but like, is this actually good for your reputation? Like,
Are we helping or
probably
hurting
not.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like AI swaps. So it's like the content isn't good either. So I think you can't trust Twitter feedback loops. And then my spicy take on LinkedIn is like, LinkedIn's too nice and people are too supportive. And so you never get like constructive feedback on LinkedIn, and everyone wants everyone else to like their posts. And so there's just like, I'm like, I don't know if I believe any of the signal here.
It's a good point. Like maybe it's too trolly on Twitter, but then maybe not enough troll on LinkedIn. Like
Yeah.
the real hot takes, not the ones where people are calling their own hot takes hot takes.
Totally. And like also so much content now is just like AI generated, and so it's just it's a lot of white noise.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like on my LinkedIn, I saw so many similar posts about 2026, similar language. It was like everybody put the same thing into ChatGPT and it was like, create me a version of a 2026, like what I just feel like I'm seeing a lot of that. That was just the example that came to mind because I feel like my whole LinkedIn feed was that. And I was like, these all look the same.
Makes sense.
Right?
Everyone prompted.
Yeah.
What can I say about the year ahead?
Yeah. And I feel like we can apply that in a lot of ways to LinkedIn. It's, I see that on topics I'm not a fan at the moment. It's feels a lot samey.
But good opportunity if you're willing to do the work or like actually do your own thinking. I think you can stand out. So like
Simplistic language too just gets you so much further if you just talk like a human. Even like not dumbing it down. That's not even the right way to put it. It's just using common phrases and language and metaphors and things like that.
Yeah. I do mourn the loss of the M dash. Like I've like stopped using them because of AI, and that makes me, I just use a regular dash. I know it's not grammatically correct, but I'm like, I need something.
Proof of life. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You have this pinned post on your Twitter around like narrative shift as well in the tech industry.
Yeah.
Can you just touch on that? I was just reading through that yesterday and I was like, this is so interesting. I would love for you to just kind of walk the audience through what you're thinking there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm very happy to. Thank you for reading.
Spring this on you.
No. I felt like a zeitgeist shift over the past couple years, and I was thinking, we often in tech, we think about things through the lens of like technology platform shifts, right? Like, so I started my career at the beginning of like, or not the beginning, but like during the cloud and mobile platform shifts. And then I feel like we had like a false start with like crypto as the new platform shift, or even not platform shifts, but like category shifts. Like climate was so hot, and now of course AI platform shift is like undeniable and massive, and it's like completely upended the technology industry in ways that are very exciting and also sometimes a little scary. And I was thinking like, well, there are platform shifts, but I think there are also narrative shifts, like the narrative context that we all exist in, because again, to the point around you have to live on the edge of the bubble.
Yeah.
Startups exist in this broader context, and how you tell your story, you can't tell that story in a vacuum. You can't tell a startup story the way that we did 10 years ago and have that be successful. You have to be like culturally aware. And so I went through the exercise of like, okay, like what are the narrative shifts that I've seen during my career? And of course there were preceding ones, but I can't really speak to those. And so what I sort of came up with was from around like, I guess starting in 2009, because that's when my like startup career started, through like 2016, like we were in this era of like startups as like heroic underdogs, right? Like people were rooting for startups. The press largely was rooting for startups. And even like the bigger companies like Steve Jobs coming back to Apple, that was like a hero's journey. or like Mark Andreessen starting a new kind of venture firm with Andreessen Horowitz. And there was just generally like this, like all this optimism and enthusiasm around tech. And tech wasn't the like, I mean, tech is such a huge industry today. So by comparison, it was like so much smaller. And so I think we told our story differently, and we were seen differently by other industries. And so, yeah, so it was sort of like the underdog era of tech. And I loved it. It was so fun to be an underdog. You're just like taking shots at Goliath all day. Everything's about democratizing access and connecting the world. I mean, think back to all the like mission-driven stories we told in those times. Mm-hmm. And then things really changed around 2016. Part of that was when Trump became president for the first time. And I think there was like a big reckoning within tech, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people were asking whether the like Facebook and other social platforms were responsible. Yeah. A little bit later, there was the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Yeah. And then there was like the Me Too movement, which of course started in Hollywood, but we had our own version in tech. Yeah. And so it was really about like grappling with power. Like tech had this like newfound power, and it was a little bit of a reset or like a self-examination. Like everything we built, is it actually good? We thought it was so good during the underdog era, and it turns out there are some like unintended consequences. And of course, we had conversations around DEI and racial equity. Yep. And
Mark Benioff callings, Facebook cigarettes.
yeah, it was really like this sort of self-policing an era of reckoning, right? If the first was the era of the underdogs, I don't know if I'm using the exact same language as from my post, but this was like the era of reckoning. Yeah. And it kind of, in my mind, lasted through like, early pandemic, like valuations were sky high, but then the Sam Bankman-Fried was like the end of this era where he was like toppled. He was like this, he was threading all the needles and was like perfectly navigating, and then like FTX collapsed and he went to jail, and it was like, whoa. And then I think like around, I hope I get my dates right, but like 2023, 2024, there was like this big reset, right? Like, so we'd had this era of reckoning, tech had reached new heights, and we started to come back down to earth, and there were a lot of like recaps and startups that weren't making it, and unicorns that weren't actually unicorns, and investors were investing less, and like layoffs were happening. Like, Elon taking over Twitter, they was just like firing everyone, and it gave everyone else permission to fire. And so that was the beginning of the era that I think we're in now, which I call like the anti-hero era, where like tech is a little bit like amoral until we like see the consequences of what we're doing, and where progress is the most important thing above all else. So like you see like the sort of accelerationist mindset. AI is of course like the platform shift most associated with this, but you can tell like people are very unapologetic. They're willing to change their political beliefs to align with, what policy is going to, and people are going to like best support their interests. And, American dynamism, like, China's the perfect enemy, which gives us air cover to do whatever we want. And so I think it's just like fascinating we went from hero to like the sort of like reckoning, and now I'm being optimistic and saying anti-hero versus villain, because I hope we're not in our villain era, but we definitely are in this era where, I think it's like, it's morally complex. All of the verbiage around mission and making the world a better place, there are certainly people and startups who still espouse that, but it is not the norm, and it is not like the tone of the zeitgeist.
But it was, yeah, I agree.
So with all of that context, like what advice you have for a comms person trying to navigate and like plan for the future,
especially if they're in one of these companies in this kind of anti-hero movement or time?
They're called narrative shifts because they're going to shift again, right? And so I think the most important thing is not to overcorrect for any moment that you're in. And it's so funny, like, I think a lot of people look at the like 2020 and like, oh, we were way too woke, but now it's like swing all the way over to like extreme anti-woke, and it's like that can have consequences. So I think the most important thing is to know like who you are, who you're for, what you believe. Like those things shouldn't change, But then the context in which you're telling your story, I think, matters a lot. And so how you tell it in this era might be different. Like, you know, if you go too deep on mission, or like, you know, we're doing this because we want to make the world a better place, that might not resonate as much with the people you want to hire or the investors. And so I think it's like your core beliefs, your core values don't change, but how you express them has to be mindful of like the broader context. You can also be in opposition to the zeitgeist and use that to get attention and to stand out. I just think it's, you know, it has to be a very intentional decision to do that, because there are consequences in either direction. But yeah, just like know the context. Like who you are in your story shouldn't change that much, but like how you express it in these environments probably does adapt to sort of the moment that you're in. But it's hard. Honestly, sometimes I'm like, I'm so glad I'm not in comms. This would be so challenging. Like I don't have to worry about like my CEO running their mouth on anything. Like I'm the person I have to worry about, or, you know, and I don't really worry about my partners. They're very very thoughtful, and I think it's really, really hard. But maybe the thing that makes it easier is it's so noisy, and our attention spans are so short, and so going off the rails has fewer consequences than it used to. And so I think part of this is just building a thicker skin and not getting too perfectionist, and, you know, and keeping your eye on the bigger picture.
Yeah. Well, this has been so interesting, so helpful. I feel like, Ashley, it's just been it's so great to hear your perspective and hear about what your shift in your career has looked like. You've made us very smart in public, but just wondering, you know, how are you dumb in private?
I think, like, especially in this era of AI, where you just have like abundant access to answers to any question, I really enjoy choosing to remain ignorant on some topics. Like, I will see like a meme or a reference, and I will just choose like not to know it. Like I will be like, I could know what this means in seconds, and I don't want to know. And actually, a recent example that I do now know, but like, I saw everyone tweeting about heated rivalry, or maybe it was on Instagram, and I was just like, I don't need to know what this is.
Yeah.
I refuse. I am choosing to not know some things. And that's my like dumb in private. Like, it's like nice to not answer every single question I have. Like, I'm gonna save some brain capacity.
I'm actually so jealous that you get to like consciously choose your dumb in private. Like, all of my dumb in privates are like stupid shit that I do on accident.
Oh, well, maybe I'm answering the question wrong. Yeah, this is a very intentional dumb in private.
Oh, I love that. Here's for that in 2026 is just being a bit more, you know, out of touch where it makes sense.
Yeah, decide what you don't want to know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Like, it's just been so great to chat with you and just learn from you. And I know that our audience has been asking you for a long time, so we're just so happy that
if true, that is so nice. And if not, it's still very nice of you to say that. And yeah, I love that you guys do this. Like, my big gripe for so much of my comms career is there's just so little like nuanced, behind the scenes, interesting discussion of comms. I think people have this very two-dimensional view of what the profession is. And so kudos to you both for like shining a light and digging into some of the thornier topics.
Yeah, well, thank you. And if anyone has a guest or suggestion or topic, please just reach out to us at hello@smartandpublicpod.com. But we'll see you next time. Otherwise, thank you so much again, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you.